Perfectionism is an ambition. It's emotional abuse that you've internalized when your narcissistic parent made you believe that in order to gain their love and secure their ever fleeting approval, you had to be perfect, flawless. So basically, you were raised to believe that if you wanted to be loved by your own parent, the harshest, most demanding judge of them all, you weren't allowed to be human. Welcome to my Childhood Aftermath series, where we are exploring how your parents messed you up. How you've adapted to having parents who are narcissistic and emotionally mature, and how you can begin to put yourself back together. Because you've adapted certain traits and coping mechanisms and put all sorts of masks so that you get to feel safe in environments that were extremely volatile and hostile, primarily in a way that is intangible, because it was emotionally unsafe more than anything. Now, for this video, we're going to be touching on perfectionism. Something that we all kind of say, oh, I'm such a perfectionist. I have to make sure everything is perfect. And we kind of say it with a little bit of touch of pride that we have attention to detail kind of thing. But really, when we're talking about being a perfectionist, it doesn't mean that we're doing everything perfect. It actually means that we don't think that nothing we ever do is good enough. And we drain all of our energy. We keep trying and we keep doing things so that we try to reach this impossible standards. And even if we do end up sort of showing what we've done or, sharing our creation, we never feel it's good enough. And that is basically the core root and the core essence of perfectionism, that nothing we ever do will be perfect enough to hide the fact that we don't feel good enough to be loved and to be wanted and to be included just as who we are. So how is perfectionism created in our childhood, and how do narcissistic parents sort of create that tendency in us to chase perfection? Well, the first thing that tends to happen that kind of like puts us on this path is that love was conditional. And that's a thing that narcissistic parents are very famous for, right? Their love is not something that we can just have and be secured in it. It's something that is fleeting. It changes, right? So when we grow up in homes where we're only praised or noticed when we perform, when we behave, when we achieve, when we please, then we start thinking, oh, wait a minute, if I want to be approved, or if I want them to be nice to me, if I want to feel loved, I'm going to have to do something, right? So our little brains are really quick to understand what is needed of us in order to get what we want, right? Some people say that children are manipulative, and that's what they mean, right? The child is able to try and manipulate its behavior, right? To change its behavior so that the environment will give it what it needs. And what we need as children is attention, is love, is safety, right? So if we're discovering that when I go to school and I get good grades, or when I look a certain way, or when I do certain things, my otherwise mean and critical parent is nice to me, then I'm going to make it into my life's mission to be perfect in everything I do so that this parent continues to be nice to me, right? And in the long run, that becomes the way that I operate in the world altogether. Now, the other thing that happens in homes like that, in narcissistic homes by parents who are emotionally mature and not realizing that, the part of growth for children is to make mistakes. And when these mistakes that we make trigger punishment, shame, and withdrawal, right? So our natural process of growing into becoming humans that are functioning in this world is being punished. So even small errors that we make, they yell, they mock, they give you silent treatment, and they emotionally distance from you. So you're being punished. So your nervous system understands, wait a minute, if I make mistakes, I'm going to be punished. And this kind of makes me think of the most, one of the things that happens a lot in many of our childhoods, and, I saw a reel about it too. It was really cute how they tried to portray it, that when you're studying with a parent that has absolutely no patience with you, right? And you can see that your brain completely shuts down and you can't think, and the more that you can't think, the more angry they get, and then the more angry they get, the less you can think, and then you're just stuck and they're just yelling at you. These moments studying with parents like that are so damaging because it feels humiliating. Our nervous system shuts down and we can't really function. So we don't even know 1+1. We're like, I don't know, 1. And then it just starts screaming, and it's moments like that where we're learning things like, I'm not allowed to make mistakes. I'm not allowed to learn, which means that later on in life, it will be so difficult for us to be put in positions where people are going to see that we are missing out and we don't have certain skills, right? So being afraid to learn or to be seen as somebody who just starts learning is so scary for us later on because of how difficult it was when we were growing up, right? So parents who get so angry at our mistakes rather than regulate themselves and understand these are children, they're making mistakes, they're being challenged, they have difficulties, make it so difficult for us to find safety in just existing and in learning, which is an important part of our childhood, right? So we will make it into our life's mission here to just not make mistakes. And how do we not make mistakes? By not trying anything or trying and learning in secret before we even allow ourselves to show up in the world. Now, the other thing that these emotionally mature parents do is that they kind of give you a responsibility and a role that you have to continue to play so that you continue to be included. And that is really evident for the children of these kinds of parents that are, the good girl or the good student or the athlete, right? So you have some sort of some talent, or you're excelling in a certain area and you're given this role, even if the area is to be the good girl in the house, right? Or the nice girl, or the mommy's best friend, whatever. They give you that role and you have to assume this role and continue to have that role always. And that's your own role with them. The only interaction that you have is through the fact that you're the athlete, that you're the dancer, that you are the good girl, right? So it's almost like you're only interacted with based on your performance on a role, and you're not allowed to deviate, right? And if you're to deviate, you're going to be shamed because you're expected to stay in that role forever. The perfect child that accomplishes perfect things, and then the narcissistic parent looks perfect through them, right? These are the parents that live vicariously through you. They just put you out in the world and expect you to just be a performance little muppet that shows the world what a great parent they are, because all of that image is just what they believe reflects on them. And in the process, you're not allowed to be yourself. You're only allowed to be that thing that they've decided you're good at, and they just made it your personality. Now, the other thing that happens in these homes that sort of prime us for perfectionism is that we were constantly evaluated, judged, compared. So we're never truly celebrated. We're always kind of measured, right, against others. So we don't know who we are in a way that is sort of self-descriptive, like, oh, you're an amazing child and I love you kind of thing, right? Or something a little bit more general about who we are. It's more like, oh, I'm so proud of you when you achieve that. That's really good that you did this. But what about what this person is doing? Why are you able to do what they're doing, right? So it's always in reference to something else, to either their impossible standards, their insane expectations, their hopes and dreams, their cousins, themselves when they were younger. Oh, you're doing this now when I was a kid. And so it always feels like we're falling short. We're always being compared or referenced against something else, and never just us. So there's no self-reference unless we are being seen in comparison to others or to future or past versions of ourselves. And that sort of really leaks through in perfectionism, right? We can compare ourselves not only to these impossible standards that we have of ourselves, this perfect self that we believe will become once we are absolutely perfect, but also if we go back, we're like, oh, I used to be just fine then, and now I'm a loser comparing to my past self. But when we were that past self, we were thinking we're a loser then, right? So we can never win. And it's something that really consumes us, right? Not being able to see ourselves for the here and now and appreciate who we are and our skills and our abilities and our capabilities and just who we are outside of everything, when we're always comparing with the outside world, with projections, with the past, with distortions, with all of it, right? So another thing that these types of parents tend to do is they don't tend to praise output, right? So if you studied really hard and come back home after an exam, you didn't do well, they're not going to be like, it's okay, honey, at least you tried. Am I right? I don't know if any of you heard that ever, but it's more like, of course you failed. Of course you didn't do well. What did you expect? Didn't I tell you? I told you. I thought so. I expected this. I knew you weren't going to do it. You never do it. This is what you always do. You hear all these things when you yourself are trying to learn also how to deal with failure, right? So how we deal with failure, it starts really early. And when we have when we have very critical parents that make our failures something that they almost gloat on them, right? Like they predicted it, we could have prevented it, it is our fault, they knew it all, they always know it all. And it becomes this humiliating experience to come back from putting in an effort but not succeeding at it. It becomes a humiliating experience when it should just be an experience of learning, right? Because this is life. We're putting an effort and then we do that thing. And if we don't succeed, technically, we have to be praised for how much effort did we put. Great. We tried. We showed up. Great. And now let's go back and see what could have gone wrong. What could I have done better? What can I do next time? That's the process of learning. But when we have this process so broken down into, I don't care how much you studied, how hard you worked, how much you tried, it doesn't matter. What are the results? What do you have to show for it? And it's always this pressure that you have to show for it, always. Which means that, you get this tendency within yourself to never appreciate yourself in the process of doing unless what you're doing brings results, which sometimes it is out of your control because your hard effort may need time to pay off, for example, or whatever it is that you tried was not the right thing, but you couldn't have known. But even if you had known, you can make mistakes. Like, you're allowed, unlike what your narcissistic parent taught you. Also, the way they act, it's like they're so flawless. They know it all. They never make mistakes. And it's just seeing it from further view, it's just so absurd that they would expect this amount of perfection by little children that are just learning. And then as they damage your relationship to failure, to learning, to showing up, then it becomes harder and harder for you to show up, and it becomes even harder for you to succeed. And then they're like, see, I told you, right? I told you. I actually have a video on this that you might find helpful, called your parents didn't predict you would fail. They programmed you for it. So you might want to watch that. So what really, in essence, happened in your childhood is that you thought that the only way you can sort of gain some safety in these environments that you're in by this person who always expects so much from you all the time, so much, is to be somehow in control. And you become so controlling over the things how you show up, the things that you're going to do, how are you going to do them, how you look, how you're perceived, how you speak. So you self-edit so much, right? And especially for us women, this is just something that it's not foreign for us to want to do this, because the world also tells us we have to look a certain way. We have to edit ourselves. If we think of just the fact that women, we use makeup as a thing that we do, beyond the fact that we may like doing it now, the reality is that women have tried to edit themselves. We edit ourselves in so many ways. We edit our bodies, we edit our appearances, we edit how we speak, we edit our desires, we edit how we express who we are. We edit, of course, not even edit. We cancel our anger because we're going to be looking like crazy and nobody wants a crazy woman and all of that. So we become very controlling of our image, which includes everything that we put out there, right? So someone thinking that if we put out there something imperfect, so we're thinking if I put out there something imperfect, then people will see that I am imperfect. So I have to constantly edit myself. It's almost like I'm always kind of like, is my makeup okay? Like we're always thinking, am I okay? Am I sounding okay? Do I look okay? Oh, it's such an embarrassment if they see some flaw in me. Who is going to see a flaw in you? Oh, you mean these perfect people around you? Yeah, sure. We'll get to that. But it's important to know that our other people that you want to be perfect for are not perfect. So I don't know why the pressure, right? End of the day, we're like, who are we performing for? Who are these perfect people we're performing for? But it starts from how we view our parents, right? And we view them quite perfect when we're kids, or they make themselves sound like perfect. And so, you know, so how does perfectionism sort of show up in our lives? And I've kind of mentioned some examples before, but I want to tell you that so many of us sort of wear perfectionism with pride. But in reality, perfectionism hides a lot of self-shame, right? All of the things that have been happening to us to get us to think that we have to be perfect in order to be loved comes with a lot of shame. So the standards that we put are so high because we're trying to secure the insecurable thing that we never got to find out, the fact that we are worthy, which is painful to think that we believe that what we are worth is how we perform, how we're perceived, how well things that we do look in the outside. You know, it's almost like the only way we can reference a worth for who we are is through what we create and what we do and how we look and how we do things, which all has to be perfect. So the sense of worth that we have fluctuates depending on what we're able to produce, right? How we're able to perform and how the world perceives us. So we don't have a quiet moment where we can sit and feel worthy no matter what we have been able to do or not, or how badly we've done something, right? And it feels devastating. It feels like we are feeling we're destroyed. So the other thing that sort of shows up when we are a perfectionist is that we never feel good enough. So, you know, everything that we do, even if we have achieved things that we've done, we're like, yeah, so what? Now on to the next thing. This no longer counts, right? It's almost like we're dismissing ourselves. We don't know how to celebrate ourselves. We don't know how to celebrate these little victories. And again, we're continuing on this path into showing ourselves that our effort doesn't matter. So even when we achieve, it doesn't matter. So we're never praising ourselves for getting us where we're getting, right? And we're like, okay, yeah, what about more? I could have done more. Well, that was a small feat. I didn't do anything. You know, I used to have this friend. She would always say to me, I admire you so much. You're always doing these things that you're scared of, but you're doing them. And I was like, at the time I was thinking to myself, you know, that's just dumb. Like, it doesn't matter that I do these things. What do I have to show for them? Yeah, I wanted to do something and I did it. I tried it. But what did I succeed? What do I have to show for it? Or it wasn't that great when I was doing it. So it wasn't amazing. It didn't give me what I expected or whatever, right? So it's always like I had these goals for things, like to go out and live in a certain country, to take a certain internship. And I remember I applied for an internship in New York. And when I applied for it, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get there. And it was in a hospital. I was in an oncology department. It was a really good experience, right, for me. But it was so difficult because people were just dropping all the time. And it was like, for me emotionally, it was just like, oh no, this is too much. And so when the experience finished, you know, I was like, the aftermath of that was like, that was horrible. I was suffered so much. My anxiety, this, that, all of that, you know, drama. And I forgot that I got myself somewhere where I had only dreamt of being, right? When I was doing that application from my little bedroom thinking, wow, I'll imagine if I get chosen and I go to New York and do this, right? And so I would do the things and I would somehow also achieve them, but I never felt achieved in them, right? No matter what I had done was not enough. And that way of thinking really is damaging because in the long run, no matter what we achieve, instead of creating the history with ourselves that we can do hard things and we can count ourselves and, you know, also, you know, thinking of if I try this thing, it has to be perfect or else why did I try it? That kind of locks us in a life where we stop trying unless we can secure an outcome that we cannot secure, right? So that was really, interesting for me to explore as I was doing my own healing work, that I was dismissing so much of the things that I had achieved because I had already achieved them. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, big deal. Where's the other thing? What about that thing? What about the other thing? So another thing that sort of comes, and it's like a sequence after this, is that we speak to ourselves like an internalized abuser. Like only somebody very abusive would be like that, right? Instead of being like, you did great. I'm so proud of you. We did it. We tried. It wasn't that great, or it was difficult. Maybe you were challenged for whatever reason, whatever. We're like, what about this? That didn't matter. You should have tried harder. You didn't do well enough. It's your fault. This experience didn't matter. Why did you even try? Whatever, right? So this is totally mimicking how our parents spoke to us and dismissed us, right? Or, we would bring in a B and they're like, why don't you get an A? We get an A, where's the A plus? We get the A plus. They're like, yeah, but what about whatever, right? It's never enough. So only somebody abusive would do that to us, right? And not appreciate our efforts. And that's why we do the same thing. We downplay our wins, we don't celebrate ourselves, and we ridicule and shame ourselves when we fail. And that is just so damaging, because we continue to do that to ourselves chronically. And in the long run, that just really makes it impossible for us to continue to try anything. Now, another way perfectionism sort of manifests in our lives is, as most of you already know, is procrastination, right? It's really just perfectionism in disguise. And it's something that, when we learn about the fact that that's why we're doing it, we can understand that when we're postponing things, it's because we are terrified they're not going to be good enough. And as we sort of grow into the person who is kinder to ourselves, this is what we can tell ourselves, right? That, oh, I get it. You're scared because you don't feel like it's going to be good enough. This is what you do when you're scared. And that's fine, right? But what we do, most of us, when we procrastinate, we start saying, I'm such a loser. Why do I procrastinate? I'm so lazy. I don't understand myself. So we have all these mechanisms that are, challenging for us to move forward. But we add to the mix all of the self-judgment and the expectation, which is why it's so important to understand that what we're doing is actually trying to avoid being seen as imperfect, because there's parts of us that still hold on to that being a catastrophic event, which means that essentially we struggle to complete or launch things. Oh, and I should be the first to say how long it took me to really put together what is my pride and joy of work, of my life work, really, my program Heal. But it took me so long, although I had the idea of how to do this since day one. I had drafts of how I wanted to do this since day one, and it took me so long to put something together that I could finally put out in the world and feel okay with. Not because the first draft was not perfect, but because for the process of doing this, I had to combat so much resistance and so much fear of doing something that is not good enough, or doing something that I'm not proud of, and all of that, right? So we have all of us, these creations in our drafts. You may have books, you may have paintings, you may have ideas, you may have drafts on your YouTube. You may want to start a YouTube channel, all these things. And we prep and we prep and we prep, but we never really allow them to see the light. Not because they're not perfect, it's because we don't feel ready to be exposed to the feeling that people can see it and I will be seen with it, right? And it's important, especially when we identify with our work. But the whole essence of showing up in this world is to really allow ourselves to be experienced in that way. And it's not something that we can just make it so perfect that we are okay with doing it, right? If you're trying to make a YouTube video, or if you're trying to write a book, it's not a matter of writing the perfect book or making the perfect video so that you're ready to put it out there. It's you being actually ready to be okay and be seen as flawed, or somebody cringes, or somebody doesn't like what you do, right? But that, building the conviction within to show up, and then to use your knowledge and to use who you are and to put yourself out in the world, and then to continue to perfect your process, right? Not in the way that it's going to be ever perfect, but you're just always tweaking, making it better, working on it, making it something you're really proud of, but it's a process to get there. And some of us may have this illusion that we think, no, it's going to be perfect from day one, right? So for me, it took a long time for putting little parts of my work out there until I was like finally able to sit comfortably in this is my project, this is my life's work, which I always keep working on, because obviously I want it to be alive and I want to work and I want to bring in new stuff. But that's a really important sort of sign of how perfectionism gets to us. And the way out of it is we have to push through, right? It's not to wait until we're perfectly perfect, but to continue to push through. And then by pushing through, we become more skilled. And by becoming more skilled, we become more assured and more proud of what we're doing. And by becoming all of that, then we build more and we build more, right? So you see, this is the learning process that would make us an expert to something. But if we're trying to skip it and become an expert without making mistakes, putting ourselves out there, being uncomfortable, doing all these things, it's not going to happen. So in essence, when we are struggling with perfectionism, it shows, because in reality, we confuse our self-worth with the output that we put in the world, right? So who we are becomes indistinguishable from what we do. And which means that when we rest, when we just sit, when we just exist, when we're not trying to create something, to fix something, to perfect something, what do we do with ourselves? We can't be with ourselves, because that place feels dangerous, right? And much like in your childhood, with a parent like that, you couldn't just sit around and exist. They would show up from somewhere and tell you something. So you'd always have to be trying in order to control your environment, in order to secure some acceptance and some safety. And that's how we become, overly obsessed with doing, so that we feel this sense of control, that at least we're creating we're facilitating, we're controlling the environment to give us what we need. And that is acceptance. Now, what needs to happen when we're trying to heal from our perfectionism? I kind of added some things as I was saying this, but to sort of make it into a smaller, sort of make it into a kind of like its own segment, I want to say you need to stop trying to earn your worth through achievement, right? You need to stop using performance as a proxy for value. And that means you have to figure out that you're valuable without it being connected to what you do. And sitting in that space to finding out that you're valuable requires a lot of really staying with something that you've been avoiding, right? Because it feels so uncomfortable to just stay there, and it's just a void. Now, the other thing you need to do is you need to stop confusing excellence with existence, right? You're human. And accepting yourself as somebody flawed because you're a human and imperfect, that is the actuality of your life, right? And being okay to be seen imperfect is also part of this too. Because when we're able to allow ourselves to be seen imperfect, trying or learning, then we are signaling to ourselves that it is safe for us to be seen as who we are. Because we're not a performance. We're not something perfect. We're a person. And the more we try to sort of mask with perfectionism, the more ashamed we are for who we are really within, because the distance between the two, or who we pretend to be in the world, is so different that then we're ashamed to be ourselves because we're comparing ourselves to a facade, right? So the more we allow this self to show, the more we're working on this self and cultivating the authentic self. We don't need the facade of perfectionism, and people don't expect us to be perfect either, right? Because we're not playing pretend that we are perfect. So another thing to keep in mind is that you need to stop treating imperfection like a failure. And failing is also something that you need to become more comfortable with. And as I said before, this can only happen if you put yourself out there, if you try, right? So what is really the essence of perfectionism? There's two parts on how we will show up and heal our perfectionism. The things that we know that we have to do, as I've said, there's this part of actually acting in alignment with someone who is allowing themselves to be seen as human and as imperfect. But the underlying work of all of that is to do inner work with the parts of us that still believe that being perfect is how we will be seen and how we will be loved. Which means we have to sort of begin to remember back to our past, who taught us that we had to be perfect in order to be loved? When did we learn it? How did we do it? How did we adapt to environments that didn't love us? And then through the processes of remembering these parts, to heal those parts, right? And to teach them something different. So rewiring our brains really to unlearn whatever it is that we learned before, that we're like, oh, this is happening because I'm not perfect. I'm just going to be perfect. And then we just live our lives trying to attain perfection. Instead of doing that, we go back and we allow that child to learn something different, right? We show up to the scene as adults and we unlearn that toxic belief that we have to perform and be perfect in order to be loved. Because the damage of that obviously is not just perfectionism, it just leaks everywhere. And it also doesn't just leak in our works. In our work, it shows up in our relationships too. We think we're going to be with people that are going to see us as perfect, and that's an illusion, which means we will hide our true self, and then we won't really be loved for who we are. We'll only be loved for the facade, and then we will feel more and more ashamed for who we are, and then we will feel more and more resentful and more bitter, and we will hide more and more of who we are. So in essence, we have to access the love for ourselves in our imperfection, in our humanness, something that our parent didn't do. And that transpires in how we speak to ourselves when we fail, when we do things, when we are seen imperfect, when we're struggling, right? So the process that really heals us out of perfectionism is reparenting ourselves. And basically parenting ourselves the way we weren't parented, right? So we go out in life. And what I will suggest for you to do, you go out in life and you say, right, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to make a YouTube video or whatever it's your aspiration, that thing that you have been postponing on doing, right? And your process of doing that, in your process of doing that, you have to reparent each and every part that is going to show up and tell you that you shouldn't do that. You're not good enough to do that. Nobody should see that. That's cringe. That's bad. All the voices, all the things. Because just pushing through resistance when we have all of these parts that are remembering all these, there's so many moments in your life that you were injured for seemingly small things, right? But all of these things created all these mechanisms that are now preventing you from doing things. So all of these parts that are showing up need to be addressed so that you can heal them and create space. And then you can use your willpower to actually finalize a project, right? So it's a two-folded process. It's an internal thing of what are we doing with the versions of us that are holding all of these beliefs and doing the inner work and reparenting them. But also it's the external of actually, okay, going out in the world and doing it using the wisdom of the adult self and the kinder parent that we have instilled within through doing inner child work. That's why doing inner child work is really a way for us to activate an inner experience with ourselves that is totally different than the one that we have installed now, right? We've internalized a mean or possibly two mean parents, right? For a lot of you, because I read some of your comments and I'm like, whoa, what kind of people are out there raising kids, right? Some of you have been tortured in such ways, right? It's just horrible. But imagine that you've internalized all of these voices and now you're carrying them within, right? So learning how to reparent, how to do inner child work is essential because it's going to teach you a different way to react and respond within yourself. It just changes your internal landscape, which is what really is damaged right now, right? Because you can distance yourself from your parents, go to a different country, whatever, but you're carrying them within. You're carrying their words, you're carrying their things, and you keep basically self-abusing because of what they did to you, right? So inner child work is going to be a very important part, but also don't forget, you need the external work too, right? It's not just, let me just do the inner child work, but then I'm going to let this sit in the drafts. And one day it's going to happen, right? We have to also combine it with action. And that is very important. Right. That's just it for this episode. I was intending it to be shorter, but I think perfectionism is something that it's silently keeping us all very small because we're not allowing ourselves to show up as humans, and we're not allowing ourselves to try or fail. So it's a really important thing that we can look at with understanding and compassion as to why it's there, and to address it and heal it, right? So if you need help with the whole parenting process, if you're finding it overwhelming, if you tried but it's not working, Heal is going to be an incredible resource for you. You'll find it down in the caption. But I want you to just remember that, sometimes we can wear things with pride that are actually hiding a lot of shame of the self. And in a way, perfectionism, although it doesn't sound like the worst sort of childhood aftermath that we could have, and it's really something that keeps a lot of us small, stuck. We don't live the lives that we're supposed to live. We don't share the words that we're supposed to share. We're not out there living and doing and being in purpose and being aligned with our purpose, because we're always trying to perfect something so that we can feel better. And then we end up not doing it. And eventually life catches up and it feels too late. And then we do things later and later and later until a lot of us never get to do them. And it's such a shame, because you have gifts, you have skills, you have magic to give into this world, you have desires, you have calling, you have a vision. But all of these things that are happening within are making it impossible for you to overcome those so that you can show up. So that's why I wanted to start with perfectionism, because I think this is something that if more people would focus on and dedicate to do the work around it, instead of continuing to say, but I'm just a perfectionist, and continue to postpone, and essentially we're postponing ourselves and we're postponing our lives. And we ultimately never end up doing the things that we're supposed to do. And also, the later we do them, we need practice to be good at our craft. We need practice, and we're just wasting more and more time. And I think our childhoods, being the way that they were, wasted enough of our times, in sense of like, instead of growing and being nurtured, we just survived. And now we're kind of doing the same in our adult lives, and that's a shame, right? At least we can take hold of the peace that we have now, the agency that we have now, and make the most of it. I'll see you guys soon.